Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we have some planned changes in battle ratings for aircraft and also for ground vehicles in April 2018. Now these changes haven't gone through yet on the client side, but these are the ones which are probably going to go through. Generally when these lists are made, what happens is they're already finalized, and unless there's maybe one or two which don't make sense or maybe they slip through, they're not going to get changed. So the way I like to look at it is that this list is final and it will be released onto the game within like a week or two, something like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the realistic battles part, since that's where I mainly main, and then also we're going to split it in two videos. We're going to do aircraft and then we're going to do ground vehicles as a secondary video. So initial thoughts, after looking at the aircraft one, it seems like they are trying to heavily push attackers and heavy fighters once again. Now, heavy fighters and attackers do not fit the meta at all, because of how the game plays. There is only a few of them which do. The Hornet is one of them. The Tiger Cat is another. The Tiger Cat because of its supreme speed, and also the fact that it has a lot of guns in the nose, making head-ons a good idea in it. Also with the addition of the M3s instead of the M2s, making it much better at that type of role, and also having pretty good maneuverability for a large fighter. The Hornet is very good at what it does. It climbs well from its airspawn and goes after bombers, and after that you're able to pick off somebody else after, which is good. It's a good trade for the plane. But if it didn't have the airspawn, well, it wouldn't have that, would it? But anyway, what we're going to do is just go through this and have a look. The first one is the BB-1. It was at 1.7, now it's at 1.3. The BB-1 in itself has a really good defensive armament, but it doesn't have a lot of speed behind it or a lot of secondary armament, so bombs and stuff like that. We've also had a lot of additions to the game, including some of the French heavy bombers, meaning that even the BB-1, the Su-2, all of these machines have become even more redundant than they were before. But we did have other additions, such as the V157 and all of its three brothers, which mean that the BB-1 is at least better than them. But yeah, it struggles with an underpowered engine, and overall that means that dogfighting in this is not the easiest thing to do, compared to at least some of the other attackers that we have. That doesn't mean it's something you should pick up. The most aircraft at rank 1, if you're starting out the game, it's better to start off with fighters. You'll have a hell of an easier time. I personally started off with a mix of fighters and bombers, and that worked out well for me. But generally, fighters is the way to go, just because you don't want to be sat in a position where you have no idea what you can do, or even if you can do anything, and all you have is a tail gunner. The IL-2 1941 is moving down to 2.3. I believe this is a version of the IL-2 which doesn't have a rear gunner on it, which pretty much means that it is defenseless from the back. Even though, for me, it looks better in the physical design without a tail gunner. The tail gunner does make a massive difference for the IL-2. If you look at all the other ones, which have tail gunners, they do a lot of damage. Even the smaller caliber ones. But once you get up to the IL-10s, they do a hell of a lot of damage. But the idea of the tail gunner is so you can maneuver and shoot at the same time, and be able to defensively take down an enemy. The IL-241 does not have that option, or at least I don't think it does. I can have a look now. Let's just see. I want to make sure on this. I don't have War Thunder open right now, so we'll just check the wiki. It's probably the easiest thing to do. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't look like it has the back gunner. Doop-a-doo. My god, the payload options. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. So armaments, yeah, it's got two 7.62s and two 20mm. They're all the payloads, and it doesn't have any stuff when it comes to the defensive side. It is quite maneuverable, but once again, it has kind of the same issue that the BB1 does, where it doesn't feel, the engine itself doesn't feel powerful enough to be able to keep up with other fighters. Now, it shouldn't be able to keep up with other fighters, but if you want to be combat effective, you kind of have to, especially around the 2.3 BR, where the Russians start getting a little bit crazy with the AK-1s, the AK-7s, MiG-334, it's the BK. The BK is also really good, maybe the MiG-315, something like that. The BK, and then its brother, and then the MiG-334, as I said. So it's very hard for people to pick up the IL-2 compared to all of those other aircraft, which are really good at their role. So yeah, it's kind of nice to see a lowering in BR. I don't think it'll affect either of these machines, because the issue is, it's not the machine's fault, but it is the meta. The meta does not favor these machines because the maps themselves do not favor these machines. Even at lower levels, where the vehicles are lighter, you get more armored cars, you get more light tanks, so the IL-2 can actually pop them. It's still not favored for these machines. The Yak-23 finally gets a BR increase to 7.7. I personally have refrained from playing it too much because after one match in it, I realized how insane it was. And the reason for that is because of where its BR is. At 7.3, you can run into a lot of times which you do 6-7 aircraft. And propeller aircraft versus something like a Yak-23, the Yak-23 will annihilate it. The reason for this is because the Yak-23 is set up like a Yak-15 or Yak-17, but it actually has a good engine behind it. And already, the Yak-17 and 15 annihilated propeller aircraft. And the reason for this is because of the loop on it, and also the energy retention that it was able to hold because of its rocket. Now, this got better, or engine I should say, the jet engine. This got better with time, with the addition of Griffin Spitz, the P-51H, all of these new, really powerful machines, but they were still lower than the Yak-15 and Yak-17, and here comes the Yak-23 to stomp on everybody to give a jet an even better engine at a similar BR, which makes it face stuff which is propeller-driven. Now, the reason why putting it up to 7.7 does make a big difference is because, not because it will face stuff which is higher than it more, it's the fact that it won't face the 6.3 bracket. I think now, a lot of the time, it'll face 7.0 instead of the 6.3, 6.7 because of the BR increase, and I hope so. If it still faces a lot of 6.7s, we're still going to have an issue where it's going to be wiping the floor with stuff. But at 7.0, at least those jets have a chance against the Yak-23. And we're talking about the meta jets here. We're not talking about the ones that, are never really going to see a lot of play when it comes to it. There is a lot of aircraft in the game which are not in the meta. The Cougar at 9.0 is one of these. The F3D is another one which will never be seen unless people are spading it out, or unless they're trying it out. Something like, I don't know, the Polka-Storer. Actually, no, the Polka-Storer, that's wrong to say. The Sea Meteor would be one to pick up. So yeah, there's a bunch of vehicles which are not great around the 7.0, 8.0 BR, and the Yak-23 will annihilate them. But putting it up to 8.0, my experiences over the last, I think it was a few weeks ago now, or maybe a week ago when I took out the LA200, I was flying the LA174 mainly, and that is at 8.0. Now, every match was a 9.0 match, right? And I believe there was one out of maybe 15 which wasn't a 9.0, and we were able to wipe the floor with the enemy. It didn't feel fun to fly that machine. It was either I'm at a massive disadvantage or I'm at a massive advantage. And the Yak-23, if you put that thing up to 8.0 and it faces a ton of 9.0s, and I know a lot of people would want that, but just understand, this aircraft would never see the light of day again. And I think that's the same with the LA200. That's the reason why the LA200 was put at 8.0 instead of 9.0. And in my opinion, it should have been put at like an 8.3. But the reason is because if you put it at 9.0, there are just better options there, so it will never be played. And it would just be another addition to the game, which wouldn't matter, because nobody would play it. The Act-23 is the same way. If you stick it up at 8.0, nobody will play it, because it will get stomped on by the 9.0 and even other 8.0 jets, because it doesn't fit the playstyle of jets. It is a very maneuverable aircraft. It doesn't have a lot of the jet characteristics that people will use. And on top of it, your only real ability at that point is maneuverability. And as we see from the mid-tiers and onwards, maneuverability doesn't really get you anywhere unless you've got something backing it up. And this won't have stuff backing it up when it's facing stuff like Hunters and Sabres. They will annihilate it. So putting it at 7.7 I think is a good compromise. It takes it away from that 6.3 BR where generally nobody could do anything against the Act-23. There is still definitely an issue with 6.7 against this machine. The Act-23 is a really good example for me of a jet which would really benefit matchmaking-wise from a wall between props and jets, something that I've brought up before and made whole videos on. The idea of just putting a straight wall between them with a few exceptions. So the 162 I'm fine against props. The two Yak-15s against props, fine, that's okay. But stuff like the Act-23 would be in the category of jet versus jets. And I would personally be fine with the matchmaking increasing. I would like to see a wall kind of like that added. But right now, this is a good compromise. The A35B is getting dropped to 3.0. You could drop this thing to 1.7 and it still wouldn't be played. It's a barge which is incredibly slow. It's in the same boat as the BB-1, but it's worse than the BB-1. Because of, I should say by its BR, by the way. Saying it's worse would indicate that I want it at a really low BR. No, for its BR it is worse. It does have good offensive armament, it struggles with its bomb load, and it's incredibly slow through the air. The only thing that benefits it is the fact that it can go after bombers. So yeah, the A35B, now that people have ground it out, I don't think we'll ever see the light of day again. It's another attacker which doesn't have a place in the game. You can change its BR all you want, but it doesn't have an objective. The game has been created now where heavy bombers and medium bombers are, the bread and butter. So you have to give something to these attackers, such as the BB-1, the IL-2, the A35, but there isn't anything there yet. In realistic, we're talking about. In simulator, in enduring confrontation, they've done a lot. In AB, there's still stuff there for the attackers, but overall in realistic, there really isn't. The A7M2 is going up to 5.0 from 4.7. Now, what is interesting is from this list, what I don't see is the premium one, the N9K1, I believe it is, the one with the different engine. Now, there is definitely something different between the two aircraft, but I think it makes sense to put them at the same BR. They have a difference, it's just not very big. And putting up one of them and not the other one is kind of surprising, since before we had them at different BRs, and what happened was there was a bit of an outcry. So it would be nice to see that. The A7 is a monster at its BR. Sorry about that. It is a really good mix between a turn fighter and I suppose you'd call it an energy fighter, even though compared to other Zeros and J2s, it does lose more speed in the turn, but what it does have is a great dive. It has a really good follow at high speeds. What I mean by that is if somebody tries to wriggle around, the A7 is able to keep on them in a great way, and also able to cut speed hard if you want to, and if you don't want to, it's great for maintaining its speed. It's a really good all-round fighter, And at 4.7, you came up against a lot of Mustangs and a lot of P-47s. And I think, personally, that the A7 matched up really well against them, as long as you were able to get up to altitude before you met the American fighters. Because on a lot of Japanese maps, the issue is actually that you don't have time to get up to altitude and you get jumped on. Well, with the A7, you had the climb speed to be able to get up to altitude, you had the energy to be able to initiate the fight, and you had firepower to finish it. It's an overall really good aircraft, so I don't really think it's... I don't think its BR change is bad. I think it's fine. At 5.0, it basically means that you're facing the same stuff when it comes to America anyway. Not many people play 6.0 or, 5.3, 5.7 when it comes to America. You're pretty much looking at the Bearcats there. You're looking at the P-51H that a lot of people hopefully will play now with the change to the Yak-23. Since it's 6.3, so it won't meet that thing anymore. And the P-51H is a monster that people just don't play. And also it's in the Tiger Cat bracket, that 6.0 area. But overall, it's probably going to face exactly the same stuff. It just means that it doesn't get into 3.7s, which would be unfortunate. We have a drastic change to the Beaufighter Mark 21, 5.0 to 4.0, so a whole BR change. It's incredibly surprising to me that the Beaufighters have always stuck their same BR for years now, because the main issue with them is that they don't fit the game. The first Beaufighter has a lot of guns on it, a lot of armament on it, and you can actually get a decent amount of kills, but it's not from the Beaufighter, it is from people making mistakes. If you know how to face the Beaufighter, you first of all don't head on it, you second of all don't go near it at low speed, and you third of all don't set yourself up so you're gonna miss the initial hit and then get in front of its guns, so overshoot the thing. If you follow these three rules, the Beaufighter can't touch you at all. It lost its maneuverability, or its very good maneuverability. It's still maneuverable, but it lost its good maneuverability a very long time ago. Now. And what it's left with is a Beaufighter which can snapshot, a Beaufighter that's good at head-ons, but has a pilot which is made out of paper, meaning that pilot knocking him is not that hard to do. Now, I'm talking about the first Beaufighter there. Oh. Sorry about that. Unfortunately, I have a cold. But with the other Beaufighters, the Mark 21 and Mark 10, these abilities are weakened by the fact that they were and still are at higher BRs. They have worse armaments, in my opinion, and the idea is they have secondary weapons which are better. The Mark 21, I believe, having the torpedo, and also rockets, which the rockets personally don't do anything because they're HVARs. And on top of that, the torpedo itself, the criteria to drop the torpedo is incredibly hard to fulfill, especially in a Beaufighter. You have to go incredibly slow, incredibly low to the altitude-wise. So either the ship's going to knock you out, which happens a lot, or a fighter is going to come along, see all the flak from the ship, and annihilate you because you're going slow and you're going low, and there's nothing you can do about it. So the only map where it really works, where you can use the torpedo, is somewhere like Norway, where you can kind of disappear for 5 minutes and kill a ship. But there are better vehicles for the British to do this. I would even say I don't know what it is, but it's not the Firefly, it's the other one. You know, the one which everybody hates. I can't remember what it's called. It's in the naval line. It's like attacker, pseudo, fighter. It's the one which is absolutely huge. It's Squire made a video about it ages ago, talking about how terrible it was, and it is awful. But I'd say the Beaufighter, when it comes to its secondary armaments, is even worse than it, because it struggles with being able to do anything. Now, when it comes to a fighting capacity, At 5.0 and 4.0, you're running into the Germans. The Germans with the BF109 G6s, and the F4 trops, and the G2 trops. At 4.0 and 3.7, you're running into the Germans. The BF109 G2 trop, the BF109 F4, and the BF109 F4 trop. And sometimes a Focke-Wulf. These will annihilate you. There is nothing you can really do in the Beaufighter which can give you an advantage at the start of an engagement with a BF109. The only way that you can beat a BF109 is if he cocks up. And he may cock up. You may get lucky. But you can't rely on that, meaning that you have to use this thing as a get on my tail. I'm going to drag some people down, you're going to follow me, I'm going to get some assists. The tail gun is pretty much useless with the Vickers gun. So drop in BR, I think, is nice to see for the Mark 21 and Mark 10. Once again, in the same boat as the A35, the BB1 IL2, with a BR drop, will we see more play from it? Maybe the Mark 21, since it's so drastic. But the issue is that these planes fundamentally don't fit the realistic game mode. So there's no real reason to play them. The Breda 88 is getting dropped to 2.0. Has the same problem as pretty much everything else, but at least the Breda 88 can fight for one turn. After that, its engines want to kill themselves, and on top of it, it just is incredibly sluggish on the second turn. That's all I can really want to say about that aircraft. Oh, it does have really good armament, but at 2.0, the Italians have really good rank 1 and rank 2 aircraft. They are really fun to fly, and even rank 3 and 4. You know, they have a good mix between climbing, energy fighting, and turning. It's a really nice combo. So taking the Breda 88 over something like a C202 is a hard sell. But now that it's at 2.0, you're comparing it to the C200s, it's definitely a better sell, but it's still a bad sell, in my opinion. They're changing some of the DO217s, so they're dropping 3 of them, the J1, J2, and N1, by 0.3. Will this make a big difference? No. All of these variants of the DO217s are either overshadowed by bomber variants, or they're just too sluggish. One of the issues with the fighter variants of the DO217 is that they are designed in a way to be night fighters. At least they were in World War II. And the biggest issue with that is the fact that if you look at them in game, the way that the game is set up, they cannot use the advantages which were given to them in World War II in a night fighter setting. So element of surprise would be a big one. Also radar would also be a big one. Everybody technically gets radar in realistic instead of just a few apt people. Obviously, you still have some of the advantages, such as the guns, and on top of that, with the DO217s, it's very similar to the Beaufighters. Just don't head on it, and it won't be able to kill you. The tail, or the gunners in general, are not very good on the 217s, but you can get some lucky fires sometime. Being them pushed down by 0.3, is this going to make a big difference to their play? More people going to play them. They may be a better option over stuff like the Heinkels. So maybe this is the reason for the change. Maybe try and get them used instead of the Heinkels. But I personally really like the Heinkels, and that's just from a personal preference kind of thing. So yeah, it's kind of weird that that they're changing these, but if it's to promote their play, I can understand it. I still wouldn't take them because of, once again, the realistic game mode. It either favors heavy bombers or fighters. There's not really much in between when it comes to the game mode now. Needs a bit more flexibility, in my opinion. The F-84B is going up from 7.0 to 7.3. The F-84 has always been contentious, and it was mainly contentious because of the Italian one, the F-84G. Now the Americans have the F-84G. It looks like it's time to tamper with the F-84B. The F-84B is an interesting cookie. It has been a rampant machine for at least a year now, and that's if a player lets it or if it goes up against props. Against jets, the F-84B has one thing on its side at its BR, and that's speed. The speed of the machine is insane when you compare it to other 7.0 jets. There are only a few jets at 7.0 that can keep up with it. But when it comes to its maneuverability, that's where it struggles. But the main issue I personally have with stuff like the F-84B and other 7.0 and now 7.3 jets is the fact they face props. And the fact that there's only 0.3 BR difference, or at least there used to be, between props and the F-84B. And the reason why at 7.0 you don't get a lot of jet versus jet matches is because there's a hell of a lot of really bad 7.0 jets. There is only a few good ones. Like one I can think of is the Meteor F Mark III, and I'm not even sure if it's 7.0 anymore. It might be 7.3. But I believe it's 7.0. The MiG-9s are very good. But when we look at a lot of the other jets, such as the 162, the stock 262 can be hard to use, but it's okay to use. The kicker is in that bracket when we compare it to the F-84B, the P-80, of course, the F-80, both, in my opinion, inferior to the F-84B, at least in if you want to stick to the B's playstyle. But one of the biggest issues with all of these machines is that they face props, and it annoys the hell out of me. As a person who favors propeller aircraft, having to face stuff like F-84Bs does not seem fair. It is pretty much they try and snapshot you, or they try and head on you, and then they pull off, they wait 5 minutes, they try and do it again. Just keep doing that over and over and over again. It is not fun gameplay. It is boring, especially if there is 3 of them trying to do it at the same time. The F4 F3, the Wildcat, is going up by 0.3 BR. They did change its flight model recently. I haven't flown it personally. The only thing that I can say about the F4 F3 is the fact that I still don't think they've fixed its tail. So what happens is, with it, is you will get your tail shot up and your elevator will just straight fall off, and then you'll start doing loops in the air, and there's nothing you can do about it. You may have seen it with some Spitfires as well, like if you're turning hard with elevator up and ailerons. If somebody knocks off your elevator while you're doing that, you do flips, and, and then you flop into the ground. The Wildcat seems to do this with everything. Oh, the Firebrand was the thing I was thinking of, by the way, with when comparing it to the Beaufighter. So the Wildcats have that issue as well. Putting it up to 2.7, I'm not sure about that. Like, the Wildcat has really good armament, it has good maneuverability, but at 2.7 now, there are so many aircraft that take over it which are 2.0 and lower, which can absolutely school us. The Hurricane is one of them. The HE-100 is another one. Pretty much any Japanese aircraft. I don't think this is justified for the F4, F3, and it just means that it'll get up into 3.0 and 3.3 battles and get annihilated by those German aircraft, which are so strong around that BR. So I don't personally like that change. I think that's a bad change. Let's move on though. The Firebrand is getting its BR decreased to 4.3. The main issue with the Firebrand is that it is a second-class fighter compared to everything else, and it has the secondary armament, which means that if you want to take it, you're not a very good fighter. And also on top of it, the secondary armament isn't good enough to take. So you're basically left with a machine at 4.3, which really isn't that good. Now let's compare it to something else, which is at 4.3, the Spitfire F Mark 9. The Spitfire F Mark 9 compared to the Firebrand, the only thing that the Firebrand may have is dive speed, but that's only because I haven't tested it, so I'm not exactly sure about that. Everything else that the Firebrand has is worse, so there's really no reason to take it over either a Typhoon or a Spitfire. Personally, I would take the Spitfire, especially with the addition, which I suppose not a ton of people will have, of the Spitfire F Mark 9C.